The PGA Tour is back this weekend, ready to tee off 2021 down in Hawaii. It is the Century Tournament of Champions. It is a no-cut event. It is an awesome field. It's going to be a fun one. What better way to start off the 2020 calendar year than with this weekend's event? Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, PGA is back. Happy New Year to you. How you doing?
I'm good. It's good to have PGA back. It's always fun to dig into, talk to you once a week. It's generally our most laid-back show of all the shows that we do. And this week we get a really good field.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, it's a good way to bring things back because, A, there's no stress about a cut. I think that's, like, the number one thing for me as far as, like, level of enjoyment, because I can wait until, like, midday Saturday before I really start to stress things. That's always helpful. It's a good field. I'm not scrambling to find dudes who like have 15,000 holes in their profile to try to talk up. It's nice and it's reassuring. The only downside I will say is with it being in Hawaii, things start so late that like I can't track it during the workday. And I think that that's one of the big pluses of PGA DFS is a diversion during work, Thursday, Friday. Not that I would ever be like distracted during work at any point. Never. However, you know, if that's the one thing that we got working against us, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to nitpick. We got 2 weeks out in Hawaii, and then we start the West Coast swing. So it's a little bit of a different schedule time-wise, but, you know, we're still living in that East Coast time zone, which is the best coast. So is it? I don't know. Well, it's, you know,
things start so late. I kind of hate it, honestly.
Yeah. I mean,
like when I've been in Pacific time playing like MLB DFS stuff and lock is at 4:00, it's like heaven. So I would push back on that personally.
Yeah, and also I've toured the West Coast over the past few years with my wife, and it's pretty good out there too. So
yeah, I would prefer Pacific time if we're being fully honest here. The only downside is like missing out on what happens on the East Coast in the morning, but like whatever, I can get over that, or just get up very early. That works too. Before we dive into the Century Tournament of Champions, if you've ever wanted to quiz Brandon when it comes to PGA DFS or betting, we have a new Q&A show coming up today for the Century Tournament of Champions. Brandon will be live on YouTube at 3:30 p.m. Eastern today on the FanDuel YouTube page, answering your questions. It'll also be on Facebook, Periscope, and Twitch. So wherever your streaming platform of choice is, you can go there 3:30 p.m. Eastern today and ask Brandon questions about his win simulations, golfers he wants to bet this week, talk some DFS. That'll be live at 3:30 p.m. today. I'll tweet out a link later on. But Brandon, I think that'll be a lot of fun. I've enjoyed the MLB Q&A shows. I thought those were really fun. The snake draft shows were fun too. So excited to get you in on the action here solo for today.
Yeah, it'll be different without you. I've only ever really done I think maybe 2 podcasts without you.
2, yeah, because I had my wedding and then when my appendix came out. I think those are the 2.
I think so. And they were, I want to say, both for the Greenbrier.
Yeah, they were in July for sure.
Yeah, but it'll be a little weird. There'll be a bit of a learning curve, but I build out some stuff so I can show some comparisons, talk about my win sims, and hopefully we, hit a winner.
And I'll actually be listening to you for once. Like usually when we're together, I just don't listen. But this time I will be listening. That'll be great.
You're going to try to interrupt me, but you won't have that ability.
I know. I will be shouting at my computer like a big weirdo. 3:30 p.m. Eastern, you can not hear me shouting and interrupting Brandon today on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope pages. That'll be every Tuesday going forward. We'll also have our NFL Q&A. That's coming up Friday. No more snake drafts with Brandon, JJ, and myself, but we will be doing a Q&A talking DFS, talking betting for the playoffs, starting this week on Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you're subscribed on your streaming platform of choice. Also, our NFL DFS preview for Saturday and Sunday coming up on Thursday. That'll be live on YouTube at 10 a.m. Eastern, and then also on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed immediately after. Tom Vecchio is back with NBA DFS every weekday here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed at the Daily ISO. So lots of reasons to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, leave a rating and review if you like what you hear, but also check out the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope channels. The Century Tournament of Champions is this weekend. It is at Kapalua Resort on the Plantation Course. It's a long one, 7,596 yards, but also a par 73. So obviously got to shift the expectations there a bit. It is a no-cut event, which is good. A bit different than previous years. There have generally been about 30 to 35 golfers in the field. This year there are 42 because they had to change the eligibility rules with the shortened schedule last year. So different field, but still a very strong field, which has been the case in past years, but a couple more golfers than we have had in the past, which is worth mentioning before we dive into things like what has worked well in the past at this event. Brandon, we do have a lot of data, though, at Kapalua, and I think that's a good thing because it allows us to figure out what archetype of golf we want to target. When you look at that data, what stands out to you for this course?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at past winners, they're all pretty good, and that's generally what we see in no-cut events. In mind, sort of at the top, I think with a no-cut event, there's an idea that you can kind of punt a lot, and that's not necessarily the case. I'll talk more about that in a second, but I think just overall ability, it should be something that we keep in mind. That probably means that we'll need a little bit more of a balanced build this week if we want to get access to the best golfers or as many of the best golfers as we can. I know it's scary to fade someone like Dustin Johnson or Justin Thomas, but it might work out if they do not win. But as for the actual stats themselves, it's we should expect these better golfers to emerge, and that means just good tee to green golfers and good putters get boosted. But the distance really matters here. It was 4 yards shy of 7,600 last year, par 73 with only 3 par threes. In the par fives, you have to be able to score on the par fives. It's just going to be crucial to separate into not only to separate and move up the leaderboard, but take advantage and score FanDuel points, which is, the name of the game. You obviously want the winners for those finishing positions, but you also just need FanDuel points. That comes from birdies and eagles. According to Data Golf, driving distance is about as vital here as any course on the PGA Tour. The most similar courses, according to Data Golf, are Torrey Pines, Riviera, and Augusta National. And coincidentally, the least similar course to Kapalua is El Camaleon, which is the most recent course that we've had. So just a reminder, recent finishes, if you just look, like, they're not the most relevant. They can be misleading if courses are, favor different things. And, apparently, according to Data Golf, you couldn't really get two more different courses, between the two. So in all, the most important stats for me are driving distance. That's pretty much a must. Strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting on Bermuda, birdie or better rate, and par 5 scoring. So basically still distance, still those irons from approach play, but just taking advantage of the par 5s and being able to make some putts.
Yeah, the birdie or better rate is important because last year it wasn't as important because the playoff was Justin Thomas, Patrick Reed, and Xander Schauffele at 14 under. But I think if I recall correctly, it was either this one or the Sony last year. There was absurd wind, and that may have influenced scoring there. But the year before that, Xander won at 23 under with Gary Woodland at 22 under. 2018, DJ won at 24 under. So I think just getting birdies is going to be pretty key here. With regards to the distance, you look back at last year, the top half of the field, their median ranking in driving distance for the full season was 32nd. The bottom half of the field, their median ranking for driving distance for the full season was 116th, whereas they were 59th in accuracy. The top golfers were 119th. So basically, if you were accurate, you finished poorly. If you were long, you finished well. I don't want to be reductive, but that's the way things work. So I think selling out for distance, trying to find guys who can launch it, even if they have imperfections elsewhere, probably going to be the way to play things this week. Yeah, I think we just need that length.
And speaking of that, you think about what this field traditionally is, it's the winners. and you can win if you're short at certain courses.
Right.
So, we get a lot of golfers at the bottom of this field who are maybe very accurate, not necessarily long. They won some of those courses that fit them better, some weaker fields. Now they're playing a really long course with a lot of the big hitters, and the big hitters almost always, well, let's say all of the best golfers are big hitters. Mm-hmm. Being a big hitter doesn't necessarily mean you're one of the best, but no cut, 72 holes, you have to best these guys. And if you look at the past winners, I mean, just a bunch of studs. So, I think that's key this week is yes, it's gonna feel weird if you don't play Dustin Johnson or Justin Thomas. I love JT this week, but you kind of need access to these golfers who can win, and there are about 10 or 15 at the bottom who just don't really profile as very likely to win.
Right. And we'll talk about roster construction kind of throughout the podcast for today. We might actually differ when it comes to that, but we can talk about that later on. But one way that we can find out what the optimal roster construction is by looking at past optimal lineups, because this is a unique event. Obviously, like I said, there are more golfers in the field this week, but it's still just 42 golfers. And that's very different than what we usually have, even for like a WGC field. So when you look back at past optimals, what are the big takeaways for you?
So I have just 2 past optimals on FanDuel for this setup, and of the 12 golfers who made it, no golfer had a salary below 8,300. That was Sebastian Munoz last year. In 2019, no golfer had a salary below 9,100. You're going to need the winner at a course like this, but last year we had that 3-man playoff you mentioned. Justin Thomas and Patrick Reed made it. Xander didn't in the optimal. But again, there aren't, whenever you view the optimal lineup in a no-cut event, it's very rare because no-cut events are just generally by nature tougher. We don't get like no-cut week events. It's just not really how it works. You don't see a lot of $7,000 golfers in these optimals. So keep that in mind. And there are a few who are going to tempt me, probably similar ones who are going to tempt you this week. History says that's not the best idea. It says be a little bit more balanced. That is scary because I think there are 6 golfers in the 9,000 range, which is very, it's a very tight range. But I would say the thing I learned most from the optimals, I'm not going to read off the names or anything, is just don't treat this as something where you can punt with 2 basement golfers in salary, because it's just not necessarily how you get FanDuel points in an event like this.
I think the difference is if you can feel good about those basement golfers, that's different. Like if you can realistically see them finishing well, then that's fine. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, in the last year's, we had both JT Poston and Sebastian Munoz in there. They were both under $8,500. So there is a path to those guys doing well as long as you feel good about them. Now, if you can't see them finishing top 10, like you need a top 10. Like I think that's what you need to ask yourself is, can this person, regardless of salary, realistically finish in the top 10? And if you can't say yes to that question, then you can't use them. Is that a way that you would view it?
I kind of do that. In a full cut event, it's almost like top 15, top 20.
Right.
But you're gonna miss. Like you're gonna miss on golfers. You need upside to make up for that. But I think that, let's just say, before I did a lot of studying, I would think you could punt and miss out because you're guaranteed 72 holes from these golfers. But if they're not making birdies, they're not going to do anything. So I do think that like a top 10 upside is definitely something that all of your golfers need to have this week.
Right. So finishing upside, but also like you mentioned, birdie chances, because that's how you take advantage of 72 holes. Like if you're getting 72 pars, if you're Francescoing this thing, like it's not going to matter. But if you can actually get some birdies in there, so if you can find lower salary golfers who A, realistically can finish top 10, but B, make birdies, I think that's where I'm willing to be a bit less balanced. And I think that there are 2-ish guys who
Kochrack and Munoz.
No.
Okay.
What's Munoz's salary?
I think he's 75.
Oh. He was not the guy I was thinking of. I will tell you about the other guy later on in the podcast.
Thought I could tell. But Kochrack's one of them then, right?
Oh, of course.
8,000. Okay.
Naturally. What could go wrong?
Usually I can pinpoint your golfers.
Munoz is more of a Brandon guy.
Yeah. Because I like good all-around golfers.
You You like good golfers. I like not good golfers. That's the key distinction there. We'll talk about golfers who have done well at Kapalua in just a second. But first, the NFL playoffs have officially arrived, and FanDuel Sportsbook is making sure you have the opportunity to get in on the action with some of the best possible odds on the market. Right now, new users can wager up to $5 on any team to win their wild card, divisional, or conference championship game at plus 2,500 odds. That is right. A $5 bet on any team to win any game before the Super Bowl can win you $125. Not bad. Wildcard weekend is just a few days away, so download the FanDuel Sportsbook app and make your first deposit to see the enhanced odds today. Must be 21 plus and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Colorado, West Virginia, Tennessee, Iowa, or Indiana. New users only. Must wager on the designated boost market. Deposit required. Max bonus is $125. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Or in Tennessee, call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Let's take a look at past history here at Kapalua, starting off with two of the guys who were in that playoff last year, Justin Thomas and Xander Schauffele. You've got JT, I've got Xander. And JT, the history for him at Kapalua goes beyond just that one event. What do you see with him here at this course?
Yeah, kind of weird that I'm talking JT and you're talking Xander, because
I know. Usually it's flipped.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I like this, but JT is his salary is $12,000 on FanDuel, so that puts him second behind only Dustin Johnson at 12,200. To me, I think there's a big five, just the top five in salary with Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, John Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, and Xander Schauffele. So you got to nitpick this week. You have to nitpick in every tough field that we have, and I think this week is no different. So I think currently it's JT at the top, not necessarily factoring in the salary, because I'd probably prefer Xander at salary, but JT's been so good at Kapalua that he deserves attention. 2 wins at this course over the past 4 years, including that playoff win over Reed and Xander last year. The year before that, he was third. In his high-end finishes among those 4, he's gained at least 8.3 strokes tee to green, lost no more than 0.8 strokes from putting, according to FantasyNational.com. The ball striking at Kapalua has just been great overall. He leads the field in strokes gained approach over the past 100 rounds, so we know that that is still there, and approach is just our number one stat every single week, no matter what the course is. He's been knocking on the door for another win. It's like he's been... It's not like he's been hurting for a win, because he won the St. Jude back in August, but a lot of good finishes since then. And I think of the 5, JT might be the guy to build around this week. If you're going for if you don't care about salary, I think I might get to Xander if I'm going that more balanced approach. But talk to me about Xander, and maybe we'll talk about the top 5.
Yeah, let's do that. So Xander was in that playoff last year, which is not a shock, because we know he's just kind of a beast in no-cut events where he can kind of go wild, and at places where distance is a plus, he can definitely hang there too. So no surprise, he's done well here. He actually won this event back in 2019. He was aided by putting there, but he was also third in the field in strokes gained tee to green. He followed that up last year by actually leading the field tee to green. He did lose that playoff to Justin Thomas and Patrick Reed to finish second, but Xander knows how to get around this place, and that's why to like the course history, but the form is all obviously very good too. Xander has not finished outside the top 25 since the RBC Heritage back in June. He has 3 top 5s in his past 5 events. So the stats won't blow you away, but that's always the case with Xander, and we know that he's balanced. There are no holes in the stats for Xander Schauffele. Like, statistically, he's not Dustin Johnson. That's what I'm saying. Okay, where do you sit on Xander? And push back on me.
Okay.
Also, you have to convince me that JT is better than DJ, because I disagree.
Okay. Look, Xander is someone who plays in tough fields all the time.
Yeah.
And that is
DJ in swing season, he's just out there all the time, mopping up on nobodies.
All right, so I have field adjusted strokes gained since 2019 from Data Golf because they let me download that in a CSV, and I've never been happier. So I have that. If you look
Merry
at
Christmas to Brandon.
if you look at total strokes gained per round since 2019, adjusted for field, relative to this field, JT is in the 98th percentile, just behind John Rahm. DJ's 95th, Xander's 93rd. Tee to green.
DJ.
Tee to green. JT's number 100th percentile. Dustin 95th. Xander 90th. Xander's so far behind DJ. It's unreal at this point. The off the tee numbers actually do favor DJ, but Xander's next at 88th percentile. JT's 68th. The irons are all good for all of them. And then if you look at the short game, it's Xander. But I would say I think JT has the fewest flaws for this setup. And I also think that at a course like this, an event like this, you have to kind of throw in like the eye test a little bit. We know JT is very engaged. And DJ has great form here, but I think DJ could maybe not have it turned on all the time. I think Justin Thomas pretty much always has it turned on. So I would put JT number 1 over Dustin, but I think Xander, when you adjust for what he does, like in the fields he plays in, he's every bit as good as everyone else in the top 5 this week.
I think that the distance angle is why I have a really hard time not putting DJ first. Like the distance is amazing. He's not as good on approach as like JT, but like he's right there. Birdie maker, the putting is not a plus, but that's also true for everyone else in that tier. Like they're all just like good putters as opposed to great putters. So I don't think there's any area where DJ loses relative to others, but I think he gains in distance. I think that's the difference maker for me, and that's why I'd put him first.
I would say I'm not trying to like play devil's advocate on everything, but I think Rahm and Bryson are like elite plus among the top. I kind of view them similarly, where they're amazing drivers, great putters, solid short game. The irons are what's not as good as like JT and DJ.
Well, I meant relative to Justin Thomas and Xander Schauffele.
Yeah. So I kind of view Dustin and Justin similarly. I view Rahm and Bryson similarly, and I view Xander in his own tier, which is like a combination of the two. Maybe not as good at anything as those other guys, but definitely not as bad as what those guys do at their worst. So that's why I like Xander over 72 holes, to just find ways, and I think that's why he succeeds so often, in these no-cut events.
Do you want to do a bet that's slightly better than our Denzel Mims versus Darnell Mooney bet?
Sure. Is it DJ and JT
versus DJ?
FanDuel points?
Yeah.
All right. I'll add it.
All right. You can have a +5 or plus 0.5 points because of the salary discrepancy. How about that?
Sure.
Plus 0.5, not 5. Okay. So we have a JT versus DJ bet booked. We're starting off 2021 on a much better foot than 2020 with our hideous bets. Let's move down to some golfers who are not $12,000 or higher and talk about some guys who could potentially do well here and have done well here in the past. Cameron Champ, Brandon, it's a distance course. Let's talk Cam Champ. What do you see with him here?
Yeah, we need distance. Champ has it. The salary is $8,600 on FanDuel, so that checks out. He's parlayed that into some strong finishes at Kapalua, 11th and 14th the past 2 years. This is despite losing strokes from approach in each event. 1.4 last year. Lost 1.2 strokes from putting last year. He just really has made it up in the driving, which is kind of what he typically does. He's one of the few golfers who can actually somewhat consistently gain numerous strokes on the field from his off the tee play. In 2019, he gained 4.8 strokes from putting, which is the second best mark ever, behind 9.1 at the Sanderson Farms when he won in 2018. So if you look at it, he's kind of not had the irons. He's had an abnormally good putting performance to get to those top 15 finishes. So there are some red flags here. The irons are definitely not on par with some of the other golfers closer to like a 10,000 range. However, the salary is very appealing. So I think that Champ has the right profile if you want distance, but that's kind of all he does. And if the driver's not getting him enough leverage, I don't think the irons will be able to help him. I don't think the wedges will be able to help him, and certainly not the putter. So that is my concern. We saw him last finish 19th at Augusta, which is a similar course to Kapalua. So I'm willing to let it ride with Cam Champ, but he's not necessarily a golfer I feel safe with. So what are your thoughts on Champ?
I mean, like, I guess I just don't care as much about safety. And I know he has upside because the distance will be there, but also, like, he can have good weeks with his approach. It's just not consistent. Like, he can have in the back-to-back events at the same course, in the Memorial and the Workday Charity Open, he lost 5 on approach in both those events, but he also gained 6 at the CJ Cup. He gained 3 at the Charles Schwab, gained 2.3 at the Zozo. So he can have spike weeks there, and I know that can lead to top 10 finishes. So I think that Cameron Champ, while not being someone I want in 60% of lineups, is someone I want to make sure I'm overweight on, I guess, is what I would say, just because the upside is there. I know he will garner attention because people will play the distance angle, but I think that's okay. So I think that Champ at his salary is very worthy because he checks the boxes that we talked about before. He has distance. He can finish well. And he can make birdies because of said distance. Like, his birdies are better gained is not a plus for him, but at this course, it's more of a plus than it would be elsewhere. So I think that Champ, pretty rock solid play at 86, despite the potential for crashing and burning.
And he's, the Bermuda putting, I'm kind of into percentile ranks. Hopefully that's not confusing, but I actually think a percentile is actually easier to think about than, because it's like how many golfers are in the field. But 49th percentile in Bermuda putting over a 58 round sample for him. Try to get 100 rounds for everybody on a surface split, but actually positive on Bermuda in his career. So, I think he's one of the better plays down there.
Yep. He's also that's the only surface in which he is at all positive. Like, he's terrible in bent grass. So I think that's a plus. And that also does help him in the birdie or better category because that factors in what he does at bent grass, which is not good. So couple of pluses working for Cameron Champ, and I think he checks the boxes with regards to being a lower salary play who works in this type of field. Let's talk here about Mark Leishman because there aren't a lot of lower salary guys with impressive histories at Kapalua, but Leishman counts. He's just $7,900, got a pair of top 7s here the past 3 years. He was 4th in 2019 and 7th in 2018. Leishman was especially good with his approach. He gained at least 4.6 strokes there in both events. He was propped up by putting, but he's a good Bermuda putter in general. He is 8th there the past 100 rounds. The problem is that Leishman's form is really, really, really bad. He was near the bottom of no-cut events at the BMW. He, in the Tour Championship, missed the cut at the U.S. Open, and that's bad. And it keeps Leishman from being a core play. I think the reason he's worth mentioning here is that if we're going back to the Augusta angle, he did finish 13th at the Masters, and he's had some time to potentially get his form better. I'm not going to go at Leishman, but I thought he was worth discussing because of the history here plus the Masters finish. I don't think that's enough for me to buy in at 79. What about you?
Yeah, I can't do it. The thing that matters to me more than anything else is just current form, and it's not there, as you mentioned. It's there's just not a whole lot to believe in. He's good on Bermuda, but look, okay. The case I'll make for Mark Leishman is he can be good with the irons, and he can putt on Bermuda. Everything else is like, if he's not striping the irons and he's not gaining strokes on the field from putting, he's going to finish near the bottom of the field. So I don't think that he's one of the golfers I will chase, even if I'm looking for some savings. I think that we have at least 5 others below 9,000 I would rather play.
And I think the difference between citing Augusta for Leishman versus citing Augusta for Cameron Champ is that's not the only event where Champ was good. Whereas with Leishman, it is the only one. He was really bad. Before that, I'm not going to – current form is not one event. It's just like it's nice to have the validation of seeing him do well at Augusta. But with Champ, it's not the only one. With Leishman, it is. And I think that's why I'm okay putting weight in Augusta for Champ, but not for Leishman.
Yeah, I've actually made some red flags on my sheet.
Oh.
I say that a lot. He got a lot of actual red flags where he's, below the 25th percentile in this field in stats. So whole lot of them. And that, like you said, current form's not one event. This goes back a lot longer, and I don't really see it with Leishman this week.
I agree. So let's move into current form and talk about guys who, for the most part, are doing well there. I do have one guy who has interesting form and not good form, but let's start things off here. Victor Hovland, hard to get a lot better in the current form perspective, then wins, and we saw Hovland do that pretty recently. So what do you see with him here as he heads to a tougher field than what he saw at the Mayakoba?
Yeah, Hovland's 10,400, which is a very reasonable salary. And if you're trying to build a balanced lineup, he could easily be part of it. We last saw him win on the PGA Tour at the Mayakoba, as you just mentioned, but that was a month ago at this point. And I won't say surprisingly, but maybe sneakily, he actually played since then on the European Tour. He was third at the DP World Tour Championship in Dubai, losing out to some good golfers at the top. Matt Fitzpatrick, I want to call him Matthew, but I think he prefers Matt now, which I should probably check, because if he went by Matthew again and won, then that just solidifies it. But Fitzpatrick won. Lee Westwood was second. Patrick Reed tied with Hovland for a third. So, at the top, at least, a pretty tough field. So puts him in the spotlight for recent form for sure. And I already mentioned this, but he won at El Camaleon, which is basically the least similar course on the PGA Tour to Kapalua, according to Data Golf's measures. So that's at least interesting. He's middling in distance, 24th among the field. That's rank, not percentile. I need to do a better job of just sticking to one here. But we saw the not so long Patrick Reed force a playoff last year, but it's not necessarily the most ideal fit for Hovland, despite good birdie numbers, good ball striking. He's a very balanced driver of the golf ball, just not necessarily long. But can you build around someone like Hovland at this course, or might you look elsewhere?
I think the pushback I'd have on Hovland is that there are other golfers in that range I like Tony Finau. Tony Finau is 10-2. I think that Finau is just a better course fit and has similar downsides to Hovland, but is just longer off the tee. So I would prefer Finau over Hovland, and I think that's the main detraction for me from Hovland. I don't think he's like a bad option, and like if I'm ranking guys in that tier, he'd probably rank pretty highly. But I think the gap, like Finau, maybe not a tier above Hovland, but he's very close to being that. So if I'm in that tier, I just want to make sure I'm getting enough Finau to accurately represent the gap I see between the two. Do you prefer Hovland over Finau, or is it Finau for you?
It should probably be Finau. Just a lot longer off the tee. We know that. And the Bermuda putting is actually better for Finau than it is for Hovland. And Hovland, his wedges are getting better, but just long term, they're still not necessarily good. And that's something that Finau actually does well. So if we can get Finau on a course where he might be like field average with putting, you have to take advantage of that. So I would probably put Finau ahead of Hovland, especially considering Hovland's coming off a win, at least on the PGA Tour.
Right, and that tends to lead to a popularity bump. So I think that Finau's in a good spot. I am into him, not opposed to Hovland again, but just prefer Finau by a pretty decent amount. Let's talk about Adam Scott, because this is a guy who statistically looks good. The form is not as good, and I think that's worth discussing here. The form, by that I mean finishes, but as we've discussed plenty of times, finishes can be misleading. So Adam Scott, $9,000, has some distance. He's 11th in approach the past 50 rounds, but he hasn't done a whole lot since the end of the COVID layoff. And when he has played, it's been just middling. No top 20 finishes in his past 6 events. It does help, though, that most of those fields were tough fields like this. 3 of those were majors. 2 others have been the FedEx Cup playoffs. He was 32nd in the Houston Open, which was not one of those. But despite the meh finishes, the approach numbers since the layoff have not been bad, and they seem to be trending back up. There's been some additional time for him to get back into form here. So Adam Scott has played in tough fields, which could explain the bad finishes, has decent stats, and is $9,000. Is that enough for you to think that he has a path to upside, or do you think that that's too big of a concern for you to go with him at $9,000?
No, I like him. We know what he can do at the high end, and the salary is probably too low, I would say. Just long term, he's a very, very good golfer. Did switch his putter, which might help him. He's a bad putter on Bermuda, so I want to make that known. It's easily his worst surface, but I think for the salary, if I could play one golfer at 9,000 or below, which is a little bit of a cheat, it would be Scott very frequently, just because we know that Adam Scott is a much better golfer, again, long-term than anything else you'll get in that range. So I think he's really appealing. I won't call him a core play, but he's close to it.
Yeah, I think if I asked the same question about you with one golfer at 9,000 or lower, it probably would be Scott, because I liked Cam Champ a lot, but it's not as if Scott is a negative in the distance category. He's a slight plus there, whereas Champ is a major plus, but Scott is so much better elsewhere, specifically with the irons, just general birdie making, that I think that I would go with him over Champ. And I think that would, in turn, make him the number one guy in that range. So I agree. Adam Scott, someone I'm willing to go to. I think that the play for me this week will be committing to studs and then rotating through value plays, because there's no one down there I want to make an absolute core play. I can make several guys fringe core plays, but there's no one I want to have in the grand majority of my lineups in the value range. So committing to studs, rotating through value will be the play for me this week.
How many studs do you think you'll commit to? How many would you commit to?
So as in having just a butt ton of?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you would define it, what you were just describing.
As a butt ton? I want to build around two specific guys. Have them be the anchors of my lineups.
Okay.
That's the way I'd phrase it.
I think there are three in contention for me.
Okay.
Out of the top five.
Yeah.
I would build around.
There are guys that I like up there too, but but based on my lack of commitment to the value plays, I think I need to commit, and I know which two I'd want to commit to.
Yeah, in a field like this, you can love everybody.
Yeah.
You can't
I'm not going to say Xander's a bad play. I'm not going to do that. That's
right.
Stupid.
I think the three I would have most interest in is JT, Bryson, and Xander, which means I'm not going to be in on Dustin and John Rahm. But you can't play unless you are building around the core plays, which is what Jim's saying he's not going to do. If you say I'm going to play Adam Scott, Jason Kochrack, and someone else down there, that way I can I believe in those guys, and I want to be able to rotate in all five of those studs. Or if you want, I don't know where people are with Patrick Reed or Cantlay. They're not really in that tier, but I think that I'm going to do the same as you and lock into studs and hope that one of those wins, and then that my value can be rotated into the right combination.
And we'll talk about to which studs we are committing later on. But first, let's talk about some guys who are not as costly, starting off with Cameron Smith. Now, it's important to mention because they're both Camerons. Cameron Smith is very much not Cam Champ. Smith, 34th in distance in the field over the past 50 rounds, so he's a very different golfer. What do you see with Cameron Smith recently that made you want to discuss him here?
Well, one thing in particular, his showing at Augusta, but that with his salary being what it is, at 9,400, I think he will draw a lot of attention. It seems like he's getting bet down. Talk about that more in a bit, but he was runner-up at the Masters after a fourth place finish at the Zozo and 11th at the CJ Cup, the latter of those two being no-cut events. Distance, though, is not what he does well. Despite that, he was, runner-up at the Masters. He's 34th among 42 golfers in the field in distance over the past 100 rounds for me, but did open it up at Augusta. His average drive was 290 according to ESPN.com. I don't know. I just want strokes gain data at Augusta, but we don't get it. That was 24th among golfers who made the cut, so like it was fine, but not great. He has one start here. He finished 17th in 2018 when he lost 1.2 strokes from approach. The long-term story for Cam Smith is that he's a short game guy. The recent data says he might have added some distance, but I'm still a little bit wary that he can really contend on a course that's 7,600 yards. I don't dislike him. He is my boy. Great hat game. What are your thoughts on Smith?
I think that I'm not going to be in this range that often, realistically. There aren't a lot of guys to use in this range.
Yeah.
And he's not going to be my number one guy in this range. So as a result, probably not going to wind up in my player pool. I think, as we'll talk about in the bookmaker section, I am skewing towards being a bit less balanced this week, which I know is 100% counter to what you were saying. But when I'm going with a less balanced approach, it's in part to avoid this tier because I don't think this is a very good tier in the low 9,000 range. I think that I like Sungjae a decent amount, but like he's not going to be someone I want to make a core play for me. So I don't think there'll be anyone in this range who will be a core play for me. And Smith is not the top guy there, so I'm probably not going to get there. I will happily buy back in when it's either A, a course that does not emphasize distance as much, or B, a field that does not have as many long hitters. If I can get one of those two to be checked, I'll go back to Cameron Smith because the form is awesome. I just don't think the course fit is enough there for me to justify it, even at what is a very reasonable salary.
Yeah, just tinkering with a lineup here. I might not need to go below 8,600 to feel really good with my lineup. I think that's where we're going to differ. There are some golfers below that who I think are fine. It just sounds like you're more open to them than I might be. So I think, both are definitely viable. And I just, even with this, Cam Smith's not really one of the golfers I'd be targeting. So I think I'm on the same page as you with Cam Smith, just waiting till it's a better fit.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. So Cam Smith, someone we will be talking about later on, just not for this week. Let's talk here about Carlos Ortiz because he went into the layoff on a high note. So I think that he's worth exploring here at $7,800. He was struggling back over the summer when we were talking him up every week. So of course, but missed a bunch of cuts. Totally butchered the way to say that. Words are tough. It's a new year. He missed a bunch of cuts. There we go. But then ripped off a win at the Houston Open, earned a spot in this field. He followed it up with an 8th at the Mayakoba in the most recent event before the holiday layoff. Ortiz, 22nd in distance and 29th in approach. But the approach numbers did spike leading into his win at the Houston Open. He's just $7,800. So I think he's at least worth discussing. I don't know if I'll necessarily get there, but Carlos Ortiz is a certified Brandon boy. Are you in on Ortiz this weekend?
So Ortiz is a very balanced golfer. If you look at his field adjusted numbers and adjust them for the fields or for this field and look at like percentile numbers, he's only above the 50th percentile around the green, which is the least important stat pretty much every week, and especially this week at Kapalua. But he's also not below the 25th percentile or in any of those, except Bermuda putting, which I'm not including in this. So like he's like a 30th percent, like 35th-ish, 33rd-ish percentile golfer for the field, kind of holistically, which is fine. But his win equity is really low. And I think it just comes down to Carlos Ortiz probably doesn't have the juice to get it done in this field. If you play Carlos Ortiz, he can get you maybe like a top half finish, like a 20th, maybe a 15th. But that's probably his high end. So I think that this is where we're differing. I like Carlos Ortiz fine. I think he's an okay fit. The distance is like middling for this event. It just comes down to, can he do enough? Can he make up for mistakes if someone else you roster tanks? I don't quite see it. That's not what's bared out in the optimals the past few years. So I love Ortiz. I would recommend him as someone down here, but for me, I'm not going to be able to build around him at all.
I think we agree on the individual golfer, but disagree on whether there are others who could do that. I think there are others down there who can get you a top 10 and can make birdies. Ortiz probably not going to be one of them, though. So he doesn't pass the can he get a top 10 test for me, which is why I will not be going there. But there are other guys who I do think can do so. We'll talk about in the player picks. But first, let's talk about what bookmakers are saying about this event. Dustin Johnson is slight favorite over Justin Thomas and John Rahm at FanDuel Sportsbook. DJ plus 650, JT plus 750, and Rahm is plus 850. Dips a bit to Bryson DeChambeau and Xander Schauffele, who are both 11-1. Patrick Reed is 16-1 with Hideki Matsuyama at 18-1. Our boy Patrick Cantlay, 20-1. Victor Hovland and Webb Simpson are both 22-1. Then Tony Finau rounds out the top group. He is 25-1. Now, there is a pretty clear tier of 3 to 5 golfers at the top, depending on if you, which I would, include Xander and Bryson in there. So I think it's a tier of 5. And all of them come with lofty salaries. So are you jamming those guys in, getting 2 of those golfers in most of your lineups, or are you going with a more balanced approach here?
I'll have 1 at least of those 5 golfers, just based on how the win equity falls for me. I think I will try to have 2, but it's a lot easier to have Xander and Bryson or any combination that includes Xander, and I think that can make a lot of difference based on how you have to build the bottom of your lineups. So I would say 1 of those in every lineup at this point, because I can't commit to building around the core plays. I think I then can't play all of those 5. So at this point, I would rank them, considering salary, Xander, JT, Bryson.
Okay. I go DJ, Bryson, and then probably Rahm, actually. I guess, I don't know. Just because I think it pays off to go with the archetype angle. So I feel better about Rahm bomb, than others. So I think, to me, I go DJ, Bryson, Rahm, and just fully lean into the distance and kind of sell out for distance, because JT and Xander better all-around golfers than Bryson, and I know that. But I think because of the distance angle, I do need to lean into them this week. So I think that I will just kind of sell out for the distance angle, but my 2 focal points will be DJ and Bryson, and I think I'm going to commit to having 2 of those 5 in almost every lineup. Like, I might differ a bit in case, like if a Cantlay wins, then you're not going to get 2 of those guys in the optimal. And that's very possible because Patrick Cantlay is a very good golfer, but I think that 2 in most of the lineups will be my go-to build for this week.
And it was funny, as you said, fitting the archetype with DJ, Bryson, and Rahm. And I know you meant basically just the distance, but yeah, these guys are also good putters.
We talking good putters on the e-check? Oh boy, new year.
Like that's what Bryson's so scary is.
Well, I mean, that was the reason that I liked him at the U.S. Open, is because he could bomb and putt. And, I'm okay with taking that angle again here, I think.
And so can Rahm. And I think that, it's people don't necessarily realize how good they are at putting. JT's not as good. That's the scary part, but his irons are a lot better. So, again, we're nitpicking. All 5 are playable. If someone's sitting there saying, why does Brandon not like Dustin Johnson? That's not the case. It's just I can't build around all 5 unless I stick to the values, which I'm not going to do this week.
We will never say bad things about Dustin Johnson on this podcast. That's not allowed, but we do have to commit at some point if we're going to build good rosters, and that involves me potentially being too low on on Justin Thomas and Xander Schauffele, because they're very good golfers. We have to commit at some point. So which golfers' odds have shifted since things opened yesterday? I know that there hasn't been, I guess they probably opened before that, but there hasn't been a lot of movement, I don't think. But anything standing out to you?
I checked Sunday. I didn't see anything. So okay. I pulled things first thing Monday morning. There hasn't been a ton of movement, none at the top really. And only 1 golfer's odds have lengthened on FanDuel Sportsbook that I'm seeing, Daniel Berger from 30 to 32. So that's almost negligible there. But Cam Smith has shortened from 45 to 38-1. And then it's, down towards the bottom. Ryan Palmer, who I think might be your boy this week, 100-1 to 80-1. Monto Griffin, kind of always my boy, 120 to 100. And then Mackenzie Hughes, 120 to 80, which if I think of a course that doesn't necessarily fit Hughes, this is one that comes to mind.
I'm very curious about why that happened.
I mean,
But whatever.
I believe it's a lot of good finishes.
Yeah.
I'm bad with finishes because I don't put a lot of stock into finishes. But
Yeah.
I
He had a 7th in the event that Kochrack won.
mean, he's I guess longer than I realized, but
He's 29th in distance the past 50 rounds.
I figured he would have been like
Yeah.
39th.
Yeah. I'm not going there. I do think that Palmer is fun, and I'll talk about him later on. He's $7,700. Are you on Lonto this week?
If I had to pick one below wherever Palmer is, so
Yeah. You'd pick him over Munoz?
wait.
Because
No.
Munoz is 75.
No, okay. What's Palmer? 77.
Yeah.
So I would go Munoz, Lonto. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
I might put Hughes over Palmer.
Okay. You want to bet?
Sure.
All right, cool.
That
That one's a little bit less fun than DJ versus JT, but whatever. Which lower salary golfers have odds that stand out to you?
Not a ton, at least in terms of anything that's like noticeable. But Joaquin Niemann, a name we have not mentioned yet, he's 9,500 on FanDuel. He's 35-1 to win on FanDuel Sportsbook. Cam Smith 38-1 at 9,400. Sung J M 40-1 at 9,300. Cam Champ 40-1 at 8,600. Adam Scott 9,000 on FanDuel, 45-1 to win, and Abraham Answer 45-1 to win at 8,800. So that's a pretty solid range, realistically. And when I keep talking about like a balanced build, you can kind of build around almost any of those names and feel pretty solid. We're not that high on Cam Smith, but you don't have to dig too deep. And again, that sounds like where Jim and I are differing most this week.
Are you into Joaquin Niemann? Because I'm not personally. He does have the distance, and the approach is good. I just worry so much about the rest of it that I don't think I'll be getting to Niemann, which is another reason why I'm not as into a balanced build this week.
I mean, I think even without Niemann, like those names are fine.
Yeah,
you could play like 4 of them, and then because again, Niemann isn't necessarily the best. He's got the distance, not a good Bermuda putter. The irons are there. 88th percentile and field adjusted approach since 2019. So there's a lot to like, I would say. I'm just like, I would be fine rotating in some Niemann if it got me, more lineups with 2 to potentially 3 studs.
I mean, yeah, but like 95 won't move the needle that much for you in that regard.
It's not irrelevant, I'll say.
Yeah, okay. Weather for this week, I'd mentioned before that there can be some wind here occasionally. There will be wind on Thursday. It'll start out around 15 to 20 miles per hour. The waves aspect doesn't matter this week because it's such a small field, but it is noteworthy that there will be wind that day. Not as much of an issue the rest of the event. The wind's closer to 10 miles per hour there, so it's definitely not going to be calm. There's also a slight chance of rain on Saturday, but overall, you don't need to worry about too much about tee times here. It's more so, I think there is some credence to wind splits because there will be wind, but it's not going to be anything crazy. I think it was the Sony last year where JT missed the cut when he was like crazy popular, where there was a lot of wind there. That's not going to be the case this weekend, so don't worry too much about it, but worth noting that there will be some wind, specifically on Thursday. Looks like you had something to say.
No, that's when he missed.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about our player picks here for the Century Tournament of Champions, the first event of 2021. Brandon, starting off in the high range, who stands out to you on FanDuel?
JT, who I hope actually did miss that week, but that's what I'm remembering. I'm just bad with that, but I'm pretty sure that was the one. So I'm going to go with JT, though, number 1. I might prefer my second love at salary a little more, but JT's salary is definitely viable at 12,000. 2 wins at this course. I think he's possibly the most flawless of the guys at the top whenever you factor in everything, including course performance. So, the 2 wins at the course, and this is kind of not what we do here. It's very much not what we do here, but I think you get a trip to Hawaii. Some guys might want to just relax a little more. If you win at this course, you're probably not there to relax, probably there to play. I think JT always has that in him. He always wants to win, and we know that he's good in these no-cut events. He's the field leader in strokes gained approach and in birdie or better rate gained over the past 100 rounds. He's got the distance to do it, to win again, to contend again. I'm at 10.1% likely to win, according to my simulations. That's behind only DJ at 10.7%, but all the studs are in play this week. I think Thomas is just a better play than DJ right now.
That's why we have our bet. I have DJ as my high salaried love number one. It shouldn't be too hard to get to him this week based on some of the value guys I like. So I'm just going to do it very often. He's hard to touch statistically. He ranks 5th in distance, 2nd in approach, 1st in birdies or better gained the past 50 rounds. The putting is fine. He's 16th there, but nobody with a salary higher than $11,000 ranks higher than 10th in Bermuda putting. So it's not like he's losing close, relative to his peers there. He has not finished outside the top 6 in any of his past 7 events. Got 2 wins there, 3 runner-ups. It's hard to build a case against him outside of popularity. So I'm just going to go DJ. I think that he does enough for me at this specific course where I'll put him above JT. And I historically have been very pro Justin Thomas, so it kind of hurts to not be as in on him this week. But I think just for this week, it does make sense for me to stiff arm my boy for 1 week then get back on him soon.
All right. So I just checked fansharesports.com,
yep,
where you can see tags of players, where they're getting talked up. JT is out front. It's early, so I'll say these numbers, but he's got 18 tags. DJ's 4th with 10 tags. So if I find out JT is like the number one chalk pick, which it could be because of all the wins here, I'll pivot to possibly Rom or just get up to DJ. But a lot of what I said was I assumed DJ would be number one because of what he's been doing recently. So if I'm wrong there, I'm fine. I think that this is in a very easy week to pivot away from the chalk because we have so many different options. So just want to foreground that.
My prior assumption going in is that DJ will be more popular despite the tags because of the win odds and the salary. And your studies have shown that those tend to lead to golfers being the most popular. I'm going to lean on that personally, but it's worth noting for sure. Who else do you like in the upper range?
I'm going to stick with the studs because I'm going to build around these guys. But Xander, he nearly went back-to-back at this course, which is long, and that's something that helps Xander separate from the rest of the field. His profile is pretty flawless. If you look at everything and you adjust for the fields, he probably has the best all-around game among the 5 studs this week. That's not to say that he's the best of the 5, but just that he's the most well-rounded. He doesn't do anything poorly. He's top 12th in both ball striking stats, which are strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained approach. He's a good Bermuda putter. Despite the fact that it's his worst surface out of the 3 primary surfaces, he's still positive there. He's always locked in out in Hawaii, which again, Xander is very businesslike. He's not there to party. He said that he doesn't really like to, hang out with other golfers. So again, it's a little fluky, but anything that helps me, pick some nits and siphon between these guys, I think helps.
Every time we talk about Xander, I realize more and more why he is your guy. Like he's just the golf version of Brandon Gdula, I think.
Not on the course, I tell you that much. But I got plenty of holes in my golf game. But
yes, off the course, you are one in the same. My second love is Bryson DeChambeau. The approach is going to be an issue, and I think I need to note that right away. But I'm guessing he won't be nearly as popular here as he was for the Masters, given that he did struggle there. And I think that opens a buy low window on DeChambeau. He does what you want for this course because he can bomb and he can putt. He leads the field in distance, and he ranks 14th in Bermuda putting. That's helped him sit 2nd in birdies or better gain behind Dustin Johnson. That's hard to say. There is risk here that he could very well struggle with his approach again and wash out all the gains he gets with the distance, but I'm okay with that in a field where I need to take some risks. I think that there is definitely a risk with DeChambeau, but there's also upside to compensate. He's high variance, but can hit the high end of his range of outcomes. So at 11.6, I think it's a very fair salary to pay for DeChambeau. in this specific event? You said that you were in on Bryson as well, correct?
Yeah, if I had to pick a third, it would be Bryson, and I think that a Bryson Xander lineup will help you differentiate between whoever the most popular is between JT and DJ. It's no disrespect to John Rahm, it's just the salaries work a little easier, and if I can get up from like a Ryan Palmer to an Abraham Answer or a Cam Champ, because that's the difference, I feel a lot better with that combination.
I would agree. I think there's a lot of value in that. So if I deviate from, DJ Bryson, I might just take that angle and go that way. Let's move to the mid salary range again. There aren't a lot of actual golfers in the 9,000 range, so we're going to be a bit more lax when it comes to defining the mid range this week. But once we do that, Brandon, who are some guys you're keying in on?
I'm going to go with Daniel Berger. Barely mentioned him aside from just noting that his odds have lengthened actually to 32 from 30. I want some balance. I know Berger's salary is not below the average starting salary, but if you build around Xander and Bryson, for example, he fits pretty easily. He would be a key piece, especially if I only get one of the studs. It's going to be like Hovland, Finau, Berger, like those kinds of guys. Two top 15 finishes at Kapalua. If we dig back 3 and 4 years ago, didn't play the past 2 years, but that's still promising. And is actually one of 4 golfers to rank in the 50th percentile or better in strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, distance, and strokes gained putting on Bermuda. The others are DJ, John Rahm, and Schauffele. So that puts Berger in great company. Reasonable salary. I think, again, he's just another example of why I think balance is very important, because to me, Berger is a big tier above someone like an Answer or even a Neiman for an extra, 500.
If we're looking at the golfers who are in the top 6 in birdies or better gained, that is a cherry-picked number, but regardless, top 6 in birdies or better gained, Daniel Berger is the only one with a salary under 11.4, and he's 10,000. Yeah. I think Berger's very good play. I think that the balance angle that you mentioned is very good, but also clearly has upside based on the birdies he makes. So I think that Berger's a very good play. Might prefer Finau by a hair because of the distance, but Berger is a safer play, and I have no doubt about that, but I'm okay taking the upside with Finau, but I think they're both rock star level options. Really do like Berger. I also like Harris English. He does not fit the bombing angle either, but he's also not a negative there. Ranks 18th in distance, and I think that should be enough to help him compete here thanks to the stats elsewhere, because English is 15th in approach, 10th in birdies or better gained, and 6th in Bermuda putting, so he's well-rounded. He's not, maybe not as good as Berger, who is $100 more, but he's right there. Doesn't have holes in his game. And if I'm going to, not get a bomber, I kind of need that. The one downside is that he is close in salary to Finau and Berger. Finau has good approach numbers, but he's longer off the tee. But the thing with English is, again, he can putt, and that's not something I'll get with Finau. Even with that in mind, I am okay using English at $9,900 and hoping that the second and third shots make up for the slight disadvantage off the tee. And again, he's not short. He's 18th in distance in this field. He's just not as long as guys like Finau. Any interest for you in Harris? I think this range, the Finau, Berger, English range is really, really good. And if using a Munoz or a Palmer allows me to get more guys in this range, I'm okay with it.
Right. So to me, a balanced lineup is also Munoz plus a lot of guys in this range.
Okay, then I'm on board with that. Yeah.
Not multiple golfers below 8,000. That's a little more top heavy to me.
Okay.
So I think that's a very good point, a very key angle. And if you want to get weird and you really want to differentiate, because we have 42 golfers, draft percentages are going to be way higher than normal for something like this. So you can just you could build around the 10,000 range for the most part and have a very unique lineup with relatively solid win equity for all of your golfers, as opposed to, again, I love Lonto Griffin, but he's probably not going to win this event, and he's probably not going to come very close.
Oh.
So I'm just saying. So I like this range a lot, and I like English. He's still flushing it. 88th percentile Bermuda putter as well. So a lot to like with Harris English.
Okay. Who else do you like in this mid-range then? I'm going to go with Adam Scott because the salary is probably too low to me. I know the recent form is not quite there. He's underperforming in that regard, but
We're guaranteed 72 holes from him. I think that works for a salary of 9,000 on FanDuel. He's long enough. He's got good irons, so the ball striking's there. He is not a good Bermuda putter. He did change his putter. I don't know if that's going to help, but it probably won't hurt. I think he's just one of the best bets down here to return value on his salary and push for a top 10. So Scott, again, 9,000 and below, I think is just easily the best play.
I'm on board with that too. I think that because we can feel good about the ball striking, and we can based on the stats, and he's had, again, the finishes are misleading for Scott, and I think that's important to know too. So I think that Scott is a good option.
They're always misleading.
Yeah, I mean, that too. But I think with him specifically, they're misleading. I'm probably going to try to avoid the low 9,000 range, even if it means altering my lineup elsewhere. But if I really like my lineup, I wind up in the low 9,000s, I'll probably turn to Sungjae in there. There have definitely been some ups and downs for Sungjae, as our bankrolls are aware. So it's hard to feel super confident in him, but I think there's enough here to at least get me interested because the putting should be there. He ranks 7th on Bermuda the past 100 rounds. The question is whether his first few shots will measure up. I think it's helpful that Sungjae was awesome at Augusta, another spot where you need distance, you need approach. He finished second there. And leading into that, the approach numbers had been creeping back up. He is 26 in the field the past 50 rounds, and a lot of that is his struggles immediately after the COVID layoff where he was pretty bad. So it's a bit of a leap of faith, which is why I don't want to build around this range. But if I wind up here, I think that the performance at Augusta is enough to give me some faith that Sungjae can get it done here at 93. Brandon, what about you? Where are you at on Sungjae M as we enter January?
No red flags really for Sungjae, and actually literally on my spreadsheet now, no red flags.
I like that you have these. This is great.
I say red flags a lot. I'm now going to have to actually mean below the 25th percentile. But none of those for him and all the key stats I'm looking at. And the thing with Sungjae, he's shown incredibly promising splits on Bermuda. That's where a lot of his high-end finishes come from. So I think that if you are looking for some upside, it's there. If you're looking for safety, he's not quite as safe as he has been. The irons have fallen off long-term when adjusted for field. So keep that in mind, but he should be able to make some birdies. So I think that he is in play in this range for sure.
All right, we are back on Sungjae M. Let's move down to the value range, guys, below $9,000. And as mentioned, Brandon, our roster construction, at least for you, probably won't take you down here all that often. However, when you do go down here, who will you turn to?
I would consider Cam Champ as someone I probably should have talked about more because I think he is someone who really is in play this week. But
he fits the upside discussion too, which is good.
I think Sebastian Munoz might as well. We've seen him go on incredible birdie streaks. His salary is just $7,500. He putts his best on Bermuda greens of any surface. He was top 15 at the CJ Cup and the Zozo, 2 no-cut events, before a 19th at the Masters, which requires distance, is very similar to the setup. So I think there's a lot to like. He's one of 3 golfers. This is really strange. But he's one of 3 golfers to rank 40th percentile or better, which is arbitrary, sure. But in strokes gained off the tee, approach, distance, and Bermuda putting. The other 2 are Berger and the guy you're about to talk about next. So kind of weird because if you factor in the Bermuda putting, that's the real differentiator. We know these other guys are very good ball strikers and long, but with the putting, it's hard to find. So I think Munoz would be below Scott and maybe Champ, just the first place I look because the salary is so much lower.
Yeah, Champ did not wind up being in a player pick for me, but I would say probably would be my favorite outside of Scott down here. So maybe I should have had him there.
I think I overlooked him because the salary is kind of weird, and we talked about him already.
And with regards to Munoz, so I'm going to talk about Palmer. I know you don't like Palmer, but he is $200 lower than Palmer. And I was filling out a lineup earlier on during the podcast, and that $200 is actually the difference between a lineup I loved and one I was okay with. Mm-hmm. So I'm willing to take that $200 discount to use Munoz over Palmer if it gets me a rock star lineup, which I kind of think it does. So I'm okay with Sebastian Munoz for sure. My first low salary play is Jason Kochrack. He has a distance. We know that. He's 8th there the past 50 rounds. And it seems like he might have enough elsewhere to keep up. Kochrack had some rough approach events at the Zozo and the RSM, but before that, he had gained in his previous 8 events consecutively. He gained 2 or more strokes in half of those. That's helped Kochrack sit 15th in birdies or better gained, which does factor in putting, and we know he's not going to be good there, but he's also not as bad on Bermuda as he is elsewhere. 27th in Bermuda putting the past 100 rounds, and I think that's enough for me to justify Kochrack at 8,000. You knew I'd be on a Kochrack. Does that mean that you are also on Kochrack, or do you just know me well enough to know that I'd be here?
Well, both. I'm in on Kochrack, but I knew 100% you'd be in on him.
Okay.
So, it's both there, but he's kind of average on Bermuda as a putter, which is actually a plus for him. So that means we could take a chance on the ball striking. Good recent finishes before the 2 missed cuts. So, including that win. But if we look at long-term form, which I think is probably very important for like older value golfers, making sure that we're not just chasing like short-term blips, he rates out well. So I like Kochrack just fine.
I think the longer-term form is also valuable given that they've had a long layoff. Because if you were like white hot in October, like it's a long time since then now. So I think the long-term form has more value at this specific event than it would other. And it's always valuable. It's maybe a bit more valuable here too. Who else do you like here in the value range?
I will go with Lonto at 72. I will say, look, he's a much better golfer than most of these guys down here at toward 7,000. He's one of 11 golfers in the 40th percentile or better in approach, distance, and Bermuda putting. No golfers in the past 2 optimals were below 8,100. That could change. I just don't think it's a week where you play Lonto and Munoz and Palmer. So that, I don't know if that might be too many low salary guys, but I don't think you play 3 golfers below 9,000 necessarily. I think you can be a little bit more balanced than that. So I would say Lonto would be someone I would consider, but I'm probably going to limit my exposure to one $7,000 golfer per lineup.
Yeah, I think that's necessary. The good thing is if you go with a Munoz and a Champ, you can go crazy. And because I know that Champ has upside, I am okay with that type of build.
So like Lonto and Munoz get you 11,325 left. But
so your median golfer is better than Patrick Cantlay.
Yeah, it's like Xander, Reed, Bryson, Cantlay. You could probably just make that work. No, I don't think that's like a good strategy because
one of them could have upside, but 2 probably won't.
You have 2 golfers who can't really make up for it.
Yep, I think that's the right way to view it. But when I am down here, I think that my favorite go-to guy, if I can get there, will be Ryan Palmer. He's been playing.
Get there.
I know. Again, it's because I filled up that one lineup with Munoz. He's been playing good golf recently, specifically gaining on approach quite a bit. And I think that makes him interesting here at 77. He is 14th in distance. So that's not an issue. He's also up to 12th in approach and 16th in birdies or better gained the past 50 rounds. If we look at the 14 events since the end of the COVID layoff, Palmer, 4 top 10s. He has gained at least 4 strokes in approach 4 separate times as well. So it's not just good finishes, good approach numbers. He can have pop events, which I think if I'm asking myself, can this guy get a top 10? I think given the pop events and approach, it's possible. He is not a good Bermuda putter. It is his best surface, though, so I'm okay going to Palmer to help jam in the super high salaried studs. You are not on Palmer. What is the red flag literally for you?
I didn't say I'm not, like I wouldn't consider it. And if I did say that, I didn't mean it. The red flag is just the putting. And what I was laughing at was if he's best on Bermuda, he's got to be horrific elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. He's really bad. Like he's one of the worst Bermuda putters in the field. So
I have him 5th percentile in Bermuda putting.
Yeah, not ideal to say the least. But
3rd worst. Boy, Morikawa and Hideki.
Yikes!
I didn't even mention Morikawa's got a small sample on Bermuda though.
He was good here last year, but yeah. I will risk it with Palmer. I probably shouldn't, but when has that stopped me before? Win picks. Again, if you did not listen to the PGA podcast over the football season, we have changed up win picks. And that way we are doing this now is we are just picking guys relative to their odds. So it's not one guy in the top tier, one in the lower tier. We're just doing our two favorite bets relative to their current odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. Brandon, I have two names in mind. I will let you go first. We can overlap here, just to be clear on the rules. But who would be the guys you'd be keying in on?
You will let me go first, even though I won the bobble hat most recently.
Shocker that you won the bobble hat. Who could have possibly seen that coming? I'm not demoralized.
2-0, baby. At the top, I don't normally bet golfers this short, but it's a very small field. I would go with Xander, honestly, at 11-1.
I have Bryson, so it's the same thing. So I have Bryson at 11-1. You have Xander. Who else do you like?
It's a coin flip, I think, because yes, I love to bet longer golfers. Scott at 45-1 is interesting, but I'm kind of like coin flipping between Harris English and Daniel Berger at 30-1. English is the better value based on my model. I like Berger more statistically. I'm going to go with Berger.
Oh, man, I have Berger. So I was deciding between Berger and Finau, but then I was like, wait a minute, don't pick Tony Finau to win. What are you doing?
I think you pulled this on me with Harris English at the RSM. You didn't talk about him even a little bit.
I talked about Berger. I said I liked him a lot. Literally 5 minutes ago.
All right.
It's the putting. That's the reason I like Berger. Also, he did lengthen to 32.
Yeah.
So we're both on Berger. Whatever. I'm okay with overlapping personally.
Honestly, maybe I'll talk about this more later today. But if I were filling out a betting card, I would probably limit it to one favorite, probably Xander or Bryson, just for the extra points there. But like an English, Berger, Scott might be where I focus on most, and then maybe look at matchups, something else from there. It's a betting small fields is not necessarily my favorite.
Justifiably so. Okay, so you have Xander and Berger. I have DeChambeau and Berger as our two win picks for this one. Again, you are 2-0 in the bobble hat competition, so I owe you a hat. You owe me a bobblehead. So you've sent me a hat. I just haven't ordered it because I procrastinate. But that is all that we have for today. Our first PGA podcast and our first E-Check podcast of 2021. We'll be back again on Thursday to preview the NFL wildcard weekend, talking both the Saturday and the Sunday slates. Do not forget, later today, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope channels, Brandon will be answering your questions about this field. So if we didn't talk about Colin Morikawa and you want to bug Brandon up Colin Morikawa, do so there. Ask away. Be betting, DFS, whatever it may be. You can ask Brandon live on air, 3:30 p.m. Eastern today on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope channels. So make sure you are subscribed there. And we'll also be live on YouTube 10 a.m. on Thursday for the NFL Heat Check podcast and doing a Q&A as well on Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, to talk about Wild Card Weekend. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gdula13, GDULA13.
Have fun later today. I look forward to watching and tuning in. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with the Century Tournament of Champions lineups and your betting cards as well. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.